File 8 of Farthest North, Volume 1. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Sharon Riskadal. Farthest North by Fridtjof Nansen, Volume 1. Chapter 5, Voyage Through the Kara Sea, Part 2. Thursday, August 20th. Still foggy weather. New islands were observed on the way back. Sverdrup's high land did not come to much. It turned out to be an island, and that a low one. It is wonderful the way things loom up in the fog. This reminded me of the story of the pilot at home in the Drobak Channel. He suddenly saw land right in front and gave the order, "Full speed astern." Then they approached carefully and found that it was half a bailing can floating on the water. After passing a great number of new islands, we got into open water off Timor Island and steamed in still weather through the Sound to the northeast. At 5 in the afternoon I saw from the crow's nest thick ice ahead, which blocked further progress. It stretched from Timor Island right across to the islands south of it. On the ice bearded seals, Phoca barbata, were to be seen in all directions, and we saw one walrus. We approached the ice to make fast to it, but the Fram had got into a dead water, and made hardly any way, in spite of the engine going full pressure. It was such slow work that I thought I would row ahead to shoot seal. In the meantime the Fram advanced slowly to the edge of the ice, with her machinery still going at full speed. For the moment we had simply to give up all thoughts of getting on. It was most likely indeed that only a few miles of solid ice lay between us and the probably open Timor Sea, but to break through this ice was an impossibility. It was too thick, and there were no openings in it. Nordenskjold had steamed through here earlier in the year, August 18th, 1878, without the slightest hindrance, and here perhaps our hopes for this year at any rate were to be wrecked. It was not possible that the ice should melt before winter set in earnest. The only thing to save us would be a proper storm from the southwest. Our other slight hope lay in the possibility that Nordenskjold's Timor Sound farther south might be open, and that we might manage to get the Fram through there, in spite of Nordenskjold having said distinctly that it is too shallow to allow of the passage of vessels of any size. After having been out in the kayak and boat and shot some seals, we went on to anchor in a bay that lay rather farther south, where it seemed as if there would be a little shelter in case of a storm. We wanted now to have a thorough cleaning out of the boiler, a very necessary operation. It took us more than one watch to steam a distance we could have rowed in half an hour or less. We could hardly get on at all for the dead water, and we swept the whole sea along with us. It is a peculiar phenomenon, this dead water. We had at present a better opportunity of studying it than we desired. It occurs where a surface layer of fresh water rests upon the salt water of the sea, and this fresh water is carried along with the ship, gliding on the heavier sea beneath as if on a fixed foundation. The difference between the two strata was in this case so great that while we had drinking water on the surface, the water we got from the bottom cock of the engine-room was far too salt to be used for the boiler. Dead water manifests itself in the form of larger or smaller ripples or waves stretching across the wake, the one behind the other, arising sometimes as far forward as almost amidships. We made loops in our course, turned sometimes right around, tried all sorts of antics to get clear of it, but to very little purpose. The moment the engine stopped, it seemed as if the ship were sucked back. In spite of the Fram's weight and the momentum she usually has, we could in the present instance go at full speed till within a fathom or two of the edge of the ice, and hardly feel a shock when she touched. Just as we were approaching, we saw a fox jumping backwards and forwards on the ice, taking the most wonderful leaps and enjoying life. Sverdrup sent a ball from the forecastle, which put an end to it on the spot. About midday 2 bears were seen on land, but they disappeared before we got in to shoot them. The number of seals to be seen in every direction was something extraordinary, and it seemed to me that this would be an uncommonly good hunting ground. The flocks I saw this first day on the ice reminded me of the crested seal hunting grounds on the west coast of Greenland. This experience of ours may appear to contrast strangely with that of the Vega expedition. Nordenskjöld writes of this sea, comparing it with the sea to the north and east of Spitzbergen, "Another striking difference is the scarcity of warm-blooded animals in this region, as yet unvisited by the hunter. We had not seen a single bird in the whole course of the day, a thing that had never happened before to me on a summer voyage in the Arctic regions, and we had hardly seen a seal." The fact that they had not seen a seal is simply enough explained by the absence of ice. From my impression of it, the region must, on the contrary, abound in seals. Nordenskjöld himself says that numbers of seals, both Phoca barbata and Phoca hispida, were to be seen on the ice in Timor Straits. So this was all the progress we had made up to the end of August. On August 18th, 1878, Nordenskjöld had passed through this sound, and on the 19th and 20th passed Cape Chelyuskin. But here was an impenetrable mass of ice frozen onto the land, lying in our way at the end of the month. The prospect was anything but cheering. Were the many prophets of evil—there is never any scarcity of them—to prove right even at this early stage of the undertaking? No. The Timor Strait must be attempted, and should this attempt fail, another last one should be made outside all the islands again. Possibly the ice masses out there might in the meantime have drifted and left an open way. We could not stop here. September came in with a still, melancholy snowfall, and this desolate land with its low, rounded heights soon lay under a deep covering. It did not add to our cheerfulness to see winter thus gently and noiselessly ushered in after an all too short summer. On September 2nd the boiler was ready at last, was filled with fresh water from the sea surface, and we prepared to start. While this preparation was going on, Sverdrup and I went ashore to have a look after reindeer. The snow was lying thick, and if it had not been so wet, we could have used our snowshoes. As it was, we tramped about in the heavy slush without them, and without seeing so much as the track of a beast of any kind. A forlorn land, indeed. Most of the birds of passage had already taken their way south. We had met small flocks of them at sea. They were collecting for the great flight to the sunshine, and we poor souls could not help wishing that it were possible to send news and greeting with them. A few solitary Arctic and ordinary gulls were our only company. One day I found a belated straggler of a goose sitting on the edge of the ice. We steamed south in the evening, but still followed by the dead water. According to Nordenskjöld's map, it was only about 20 miles to Timor Strait, but we were the whole night doing this distance. Our speed was reduced to about a fifth part of what it would otherwise have been. At 6 a.m., September 3rd, we got in among some thin ice that scraped the dead water off us. The change was noticeable at once. As the Fram cut into the ice crust, she gave a sort of spring forward, and after this went on at her ordinary speed, and henceforth we had very little more trouble with dead water. We found what, according to the map, was Timor Strait, entirely blocked with ice, and we held farther south to see if we could not come upon some other strait or passage. It was not an easy matter finding our way by the map. We had not seen Hovgard's Islands, marked as lying north of the entrance to Timor Strait, yet the weather was so beautifully clear that it seemed unlikely they could have escaped us, if they lay where Nordenskjöld's sketch map places them. On the other hand, we saw several islands in the offing. These, however, lay so far out that it is not probable that Nordenskjöld saw them, as the weather was thick when he was here, and besides it is impossible that islands lying many miles out at sea could have been mapped as close to land with only a narrow sound separating them from it. Farther south we found a narrow open strait or fjord, which we steamed into, in order if possible to get some better idea of the lie of the land. I sat up in the crow's nest, hoping for a general clearing up of matters, but the prospect of this seemed to recede farther and farther. What we now had to the north of us, and what I had taken to be a projection of the mainland, proved to be an island, but the fjord wound on farther inland. Now it got narrower. Presently it widened out again. The mystery thickened. Could this be Timor Strait after all? A dead calm on the sea, fog everywhere over the land. It was well nigh impossible to distinguish the smooth surface of the water from the ice, and the ice from the snow-covered land. Everything is so strangely still and dead. The sea rises and falls with each twist of the fjord through the silent land of mists. Now we have open water ahead, now more ice, and it is impossible to make sure which it is. Is this Timor Strait? Are we getting through? A whole year is at stake. No, here we stop. Nothing but ice ahead. No, it is only smooth water with the snowy land reflected in it. This must be Timor Strait. But now we had several large ice floes ahead, and it was difficult to get on, so we anchored at a point, in a good safe harbor, to make a closer inspection. We now discovered that it was a strong tidal current that was carrying the ice floes with it, and there could be no doubt that it was a strait we were lying in. I rowed out in the evening to shoot some seals, taking for the purpose my most precious weapon, a double-barreled express rifle, caliber .577. As we were in the act of taking a sealskin on board, the boat heeled over, I slipped, and my rifle fell into the sea. A sad accident. Peter Henriksen and Benson, who were rowing me, took it so to heart that they could not speak for some time. They declared that it would never do to leave the valuable gun lying there in 5 fathoms of water. So we rowed to the Fram for the necessary apparatus, and dragged the spot for several hours, well on into the dark, gloomy night. While we were thus employed, a bearded seal circled round and round us, bobbing up its big startled face, now on one side of us, now on the other, and always coming nearer. It was evidently anxious to find out what our night work might be. Then it dived over and over again, probably to see how the dragging was getting on. Was it afraid of our finding the rifle? At last it became too intrusive. I took Peter's rifle and put a ball through its head, but it sank before we could reach it, and we gave up the whole business in despair. The loss of that rifle saved the life of many a seal, and alas, it had cost me £28. We took the boat again next day and rowed eastward, to find out if there really was a passage for us through this strait. It had turned cold during the night, and snow had fallen, so the sea round the Fram was covered with tolerably thick snow ice, and it cost us a good deal of exertion to break through it into open water with the boat. I thought it possible that the land farther in on the north side of the strait might be that in the neighborhood of Actinia Bay, where the Vega had lain, but I sought in vain for the cairn erected there by Nordenskjold, and presently discovered to my astonishment that it was only a small island, and that this island lay on the south side of the principal entrance to Timor Strait. The strait was very broad here, and I felt pretty certain that I saw where the real Actinia Bay cut into the land far to the north. We were hungry now, and were preparing to take a meal before we rowed on from the island, when we discovered to our disappointment that the butter had been forgotten. We crammed down the dry biscuits as best we could, and worked our jaws till they were stiff on the pieces we managed to hack off a hard, dried reindeer sheen. When we were tired of eating, though anything but satisfied, we set off, giving this point the name of Cape Butterless. We rowed far in through the strait, and it seemed to us to be a good passage for ships. 8 or 9 fathoms right up to the shore. However, we were stopped by ice in the evening, and as we ran the risk of being frozen in if we pushed on any farther, I thought it best to turn. We certainly ran no danger of starving, for we saw fresh tracks both of bears and reindeer everywhere, and there were plenty of seals in the water, but I was afraid of delaying the Fram in view of the possibility of progress in another direction. So we toiled back against a strong wind, not reaching the ship till next morning, and this was none too early, for presently we were in the midst of a storm. On the subject of the navigability of Timor Strait, Nordenskjöld writes that, according to soundings made by Lieutenant Palander, it is obstructed by rocky shallows, and being also full of strong currents, it is hardly advisable to sail through it, at least until the direction of these currents has been carefully investigated. I have nothing particular to add to this, except that, as already mentioned, the channel was clear as far as we penetrated, and had the appearance of being practicable as far as I could see. I was therefore determined that we would, if necessary, try to force our way through with the Fram. On 5th of September brought snow with a stiff breeze, which steadily grew stronger. When it was rattling in the rigging in the evening, we congratulated each other on being safe on board. It would not have been an easy matter to row back to-day. But altogether I was dissatisfied. There was some chance, indeed, that this wind might loosen the ice farther north, and yesterday's experiences had given me the hope of being able, in case of necessity, to force a way through this strait. But now the wind was steadily driving larger masses of ice in past us, and this approach of winter was alarming. It might quite well be on us in earnest before any channel was opened. I tried to reconcile myself to the idea of wintering in our present surroundings. I had already laid all the plans for the way in which we were to occupy ourselves during the coming year. Besides an investigation of this coast, which offered problems enough to solve, we were to explore the unknown interior of the Timor Peninsula right across to the mouth of the Chittagong. With our dogs and snowshoes we should be able to go far and wide, so the year would not be a lost one as regarded geography and geology. But no, I could not reconcile myself to it. I could not. A year of one's life was a year, and our expedition promised to be a long one at best. What tormented me most was the reflection that if the ice stopped us now, we could have no assurance that it would not do the same at the same time next year. It has been observed so often that several bad ice years come together, and this was evidently none of the best. Though I would hardly confess the feeling of depression even to myself, I must say that it was not on a bed of roses I lay these nights, until sleep came and carried me off into the land of forgetfulness. Wednesday, the 6th of September, was the anniversary of my wedding day. I was superstitious enough to feel when I awoke in the morning that this day would bring a change if one were coming at all. The storm had gone down a little, the sun peeped out, and life seemed brighter. The wind quieted down altogether in the course of the afternoon, the weather becoming calm and beautiful. The strait to the north of us, which was blocked before with solid ice, had been swept open by the storm, but the strait to the east, where we had been with the boat, was firmly blocked, and if we had not turned when we did that evening, we should have been there yet, for no one knows how long. It seemed to us not improbable that the ice between Cape Loptev and Almquist's Islands might be broken up. We therefore got up steam and set off north about 6:30 p.m. to try our fortune once more. I felt quite sure that the day would bring us luck. The weather was still beautiful, and we were thoroughly enjoying the sunshine. It was such an unusual thing that Nordahl, when he was working among the coals in the hold in the afternoon, mistook a sunbeam falling through the hatch on the coal dust for a plank, and leaned hard on it. He was not a little surprised when he fell right through it on to some iron lumber. It became more and more difficult to make anything of the land, and our observation for latitude at noon did not help to clear up matters. It placed us at 76 degrees 2' north latitude, or about 14 miles from what is marked as the mainland on Nordenskjöld's or Bova's map. It was hardly to be expected that these should be correct, as the weather seems to have been foggy the whole time the explorers were here. Nor were we successful in finding Hovgard's Islands as we sailed north. When I supposed that we were off them, just on the north side of the entrance to Timor Strait, I saw to my surprise a high mountain almost directly north of us, which seemed as if it must be on the mainland. What could be the explanation of this? I began to have a growing suspicion that this was a regular labyrinth of islands we had got into. We were hoping to investigate and clear up the matter, when thick weather with sleet and rain most inconveniently came on, and we had to leave this problem for the future to solve. The mist was thick, and soon the darkness of night was added to it, so that we could not see land at any great distance. It seemed rather risky to push ahead now, but it was an opportunity not to be lost. We slackened speed a little and kept on along the coast all night, in readiness to turn as soon as land was observed ahead. Satisfied that things were in good hands, as it was with Sverdrup's watch, I lay down in my berth with a lighter mind than I had had for long. At 6 o'clock next morning, September 7th, Sverdrup roused me with the information that we had passed Timor Island, or Cape Laptev, at 3 a.m., and were now at Timor Bay, but with close ice and an island ahead. It was possible that we might reach the island, as a channel had just opened through the ice in that direction, but we were at present in a tearing whirlpool current, and should be obliged to put back for the moment. After breakfast I went up into the crow's nest. It was brilliant sunshine. I found that Sverdrup's Island must be mainland, which, however, stretched remarkably far west compared with that given on the maps. I could still see Timor Island behind me, and the most easterly of Almquist's islands lay gleaming in the sun to the north. It was a long sandy point that we had ahead, and I could follow the land in a southerly direction till it disappeared on the horizon at the head of the bay in the south. Then there was a small strip where no land, only open water, could be made out. After that the land emerged on the west side of the bay, stretching towards Timor Island. With its heights and round knolls, this land was essentially different from the low coast on the east side of the bay. To the north of the point ahead of us I saw open water. There was some ice between us and it, but the Fram forced her way through. When we got out right off the point, I was surprised to notice the sea suddenly covered with brown, clayey water. It could not be a deep layer, for the track we left behind was quite clear. The clayey water seemed to be skimmed to either side by the passage of the ship. I ordered soundings to be taken, and found, as I expected, shallower water, first 8 fathoms, then 6½, then 5½. I stopped now and backed. Things looked very suspicious, and round us ice floes lay stranded. There was also a very strong current running northeast. Constantly sounding, we again went slowly forwards. Fortunately, the lead went on showing 5 fathoms. Presently we got into deeper water, 6 fathoms, then 6½, and now we went on at full speed again. We were soon out into the clear blue water on the other side. There was quite a sharp boundary line between the brown surface water and the clear blue. The muddy water evidently came from some river a little farther south. From this point the land trended back in an easterly direction, and we held east and northeast in the open water between it and the ice. In the afternoon this channel grew very narrow, and we got right under the coast, where it again slopes north. We kept close along it in a very narrow cut, with a depth of 6 to 8 fathoms, but in the evening had to stop, as the ice lay packed close in to the shore ahead of us. This land we had been coasting along bore a strong resemblance to Hjalmar. the same low plains, rising very little above the sea, and not visible at any great distance. It was perhaps rather more undulating. At one or two places I even saw some ridges of a certain elevation a little way inland. The shore the whole way seemed to be formed of strata of sand and clay, the margin sloping steeply to the sea. Many reindeer herds were to be seen on the plains, and next morning, September 8th, I went on shore on a hunting expedition. Having shot one reindeer, I was on my way farther inland in search of more, when I made a surprising discovery, which attracted all my attention and made me quite forget the errand I had come on. It was a large fjord cutting its way in through the land to the north of me. I went as far as possible to find out all I could about it, but did not manage to see the end of it. So far as I could see, it was a fine broad sheet of water, stretching eastwards to some blue mountains far, far inland, which at the extreme limit of my vision seemed to slope down to the water. Beyond them I could distinguish nothing. My imagination was fired, and for a moment it seemed to me as if this might almost be a strait, stretching right across the land here and making an island of the Chelyuskin Peninsula. But probably it was only a river, which widened out near its mouth into a broad lake, as several of the Siberian rivers do. All about the clay plains I was tramping over, enormous erratic blocks of various formations lay scattered. They can only have been brought here by the great glaciers of the Ice Age. There was not much life to be seen. Besides reindeer, there were just a few willow grouse, snow buntings, and snipe, and I saw tracks of foxes and lemmings. This farthest north part of Siberia is quite uninhabited, and has probably not been visited even by the wandering nomads. However, I saw a circular moss heap on a plain far inland, which looked as if it might be the work of man's hand. Perhaps, after all, some Samoyed had been here collecting moss for his reindeer, but it must have been long ago, for the moss looked quite black and rotten. The heap was quite possibly only one of nature's freaks. She is often capricious. What a constant alternation of light and shadow there is in this Arctic land! When I went up to the crow's nest next morning, September 9th, I saw that the ice to the north had loosened from the land, and I could trace a channel which might lead us northwards into open water. I at once gave the order to get up steam. The barometer was certainly low, lower than we had ever had it yet. It was down to 733 millimeters, 28.8 inches. The wind was blowing in heavy squalls off the land, and in on the plains the gusts were whirling up clouds of sand and dust. Sverdrup thought it would be safer to stay where we were, but it would be too annoying to miss this splendid opportunity, and the sunshine was so beautiful and the sky so smiling and reassuring. I gave orders to set sail, and soon we were pushing on northwards through the ice under steam, and with every stitch of canvas that we could crowd on. Cape Chelyuskin must be vanquished. Never had the Fram gone so fast. She made more than 8 knots by the log. It seemed as though she knew how much depended on her getting on. Soon we were through the ice and had open water along the land as far as the eye could reach. We passed point after point, discovering new fjords and islands on the way, and soon I thought I caught a glimpse through the large telescope of some mountains far away north. They must be in the neighborhood of Cape Chelyuskin itself. The land along which we today coasted to the northward was quite low, some of it like what I had seen on shore the previous day. At some distance from the low coast, fairly high mountains or mountain chains were to be seen. Some of them seemed to consist of horizontal sedimentary schist. They were flat-topped with precipitous sides. Further inland the mountains were all white with snow. At one point it seemed as if the whole range were covered with a sheet of ice or great snowfield that spread itself down the sides. At the edge of this sheet I could see projecting masses of rock, but all the inner part was spotless white. It seemed almost too continuous and even to be new snow, and looked like a permanent snow mantle. Nordenskjöld's map marks at this place high mountain chains inland, and this agrees with our observations, though I cannot assert that the mountains are of any considerable height. But when, in agreement with earlier maps, he marks at the same place high rocky coast, his terms are open to objection. The coast is, as already mentioned, quite low, and consists, in great part at least, of layers of clay or loose earth. Nordenskjöld either took this last description from the earlier unreliable maps, or possibly allowed himself to be misled by the fog which beset them during their voyage in these waters. In the evening we were approaching the north end of the land, but the current which we had had with us earlier in the day was now against us, and it seemed as if we were never to get past an island that lay off the shore to the north of us. The mountain height which I had seen at an earlier hour through the telescope lay here some way inland. It was flat on the top with precipitous sides, like those mountains last described. It seemed to be sandstone or basaltic rock, only the horizontal strata of the ledges on its sides were not visible. I calculated its height at 1,000 to 1,500 feet. Out at sea we saw several new islands, the nearest of them being of some size. The moment seemed to be at hand, when we were at last to round that point which had haunted us for so long, the second of the greatest difficulties I expected to have to overcome on this expedition. I sat up in the crow's nest in the evening, looking out to the north. The land was low and desolate. The sun had long since gone down behind the sea, and the dreamy evening sky was yellow and gold. It was lonely and still up here, high above the water. Only one star was to be seen. It stood straight above Cape Chelyuskin, shining clearly and sadly in the pale sky. As we sailed on and got the cape more to the east of us, the star went with it. It was always there, straight above. I could not help sitting watching it. It seemed to have some charm for me, and to bring such peace. Was it my star? Was it the spirit of home following and smiling to me now? Many a thought it brought to me, as the Fram toiled on through the melancholy night, past the northernmost point of the Old World. Towards morning we were off what we took to be actually the northern extremity. We stood in near land, and at the change of the watch, exactly at 4 o'clock, our flags were hoisted, and our 3 last cartridges sent a thundering salute over the sea. Almost at the same moment the sun rose. Then our poetic doctor burst forth into the following touching lines: "Up go the flags, off goes the gun. The clock strikes 4, and lo, the sun." As the sun rose, the Chelyuskin troll that had so long had us in his power was banned. We had escaped the danger of winter's imprisonment on this coast, and we saw the way clear to our goal, the drift ice to the north of the New Siberian Islands. In honor of the occasion, all hands were turned out, and punch, fruit, and cigars were served in the festily lighted saloon. Something special in the way of a toast was expected on such an occasion. I lifted my glass and made the following speech: "Skål, my lads, and be glad we've passed Chelyuskin." Then there was some organ playing, during which I went up to the crow's nest again to have a last look at the land. I now saw that the height I had noticed in the evening, which has already been described, lies on the west side of the peninsula, while further east a lower and more rounded height stretches southward. This last must be the one mentioned by Nordenskjöld, and according to his description the real north point must lie out beyond it, so that we were now off King Oscar's Bay. But I looked in vain through the telescope for Nordenskjöld's cairn. I had the greatest inclination to land, but did not think that we could spare the time. The bay, which was clear of ice at the time of the Vegas visit, was now closed in with thick winter ice, frozen fast to the land. We had an open channel before us, but we could see the edge of the drift ice out at sea. A little farther west we passed a couple of small islands lying a short way from the coast. We had to stop before noon at the northwestern corner of Chelyuskin on account of the drift ice, which seemed to reach right into the land before us. To judge by the dark air, there was open water again on the other side of an island which lay ahead. We landed and made sure that some straits or fjords on the inside of this island to the south were quite closed with firm ice, and in the evening the Fram forced her way through the drift ice on the outside of it. We steamed and sailed southwards along the coast all night, making splendid way. When the wind was blowing stiffest we went at the rate of 9 knots. We came upon ice every now and then, but got through it easily. Towards morning, September 11th, we had high land ahead, and had to change our course to due east, keeping to this all day. When I came on deck before noon, I saw a fine tract of hill country, with high summits and valleys between. It was the first view of the sort since we had left Vardo, and after the monotonous low land we had been coasting along for months, it was refreshing to see such mountains again. They ended with a precipitous descent to the east, and eastward from that extended a perfectly flat plain. In the course of the day we quite lost sight of land, and strangely enough did not see it again, nor did we see the islands of St. Peter and St. Paul, though according to the maps our course lay close past them. Thursday, September 12th. Henriksen awoke me this morning at 6 with the information that there were several walruses lying on a floe quite close to us. By Jove! Up I jumped and had my clothes on in a trice. It was a lovely morning, fine still weather. The walruses' guffaw sounded over to us along the clear ice surface. They were lying crowded together on a floe a little to landward from us, blue mountains glittering behind them in the sun. At last the harpoons were sharpened, guns and cartridges ready, and Henriksen, Ewell, and I set off. There seemed to be a slight breeze from the south, so we rowed to the north side of the floe to get to leeward of the animals. From time to time their sentry raised his head, but apparently did not see us. We advanced slowly, and soon were so near that we had to row very cautiously. Ewell kept us going, while Henriksen was ready in the bow with a harpoon, and I behind him with a gun. The moment the sentry raised his head, the oars stopped, and we stood motionless. When he sunk it again, a few more strokes brought us nearer. Body to body they lay close packed on a small floe, old and young ones mixed. Enormous masses of flesh they were. Now and again one of the ladies fanned herself by moving one of her flappers backwards and forwards over her body. Then she lay quiet again on her back or side. "Good gracious, what a lot of meat!" said Ewell, who was cook. More and more cautiously we drew near. Whilst I sat ready with the gun, Henriksen took a good grip of the harpoon shaft, and as the boat touched the floe he rose, and off flew the harpoon. But it struck too high, glanced off the tough hide, and skipped over the backs of the animals. Now there was a pretty to-do. 10 or 12 great weird faces glared upon us at once. The colossal creatures twisted themselves round with incredible celerity, and came waddling with lifted heads and hollow bellowings to the edge of the ice where we lay. It was undeniably an imposing sight, but I laid my gun to my shoulder and fired at one of the biggest heads. The animal staggered, and then fell head foremost into the water. Now a ball into another head. This creature fell too, but was able to fling itself into the sea, and now the whole flock dashed in, and we as well as they were hidden in spray. It all happened in a few seconds. But up they came again immediately round the boat, the one head bigger and uglier than the other, their young ones close beside them. They stood up in the water, bellowed and roared till the air trembled, threw themselves forward towards us, then rose up again, and new bellowings filled the air. Then they rolled over and disappeared with a splash, then bobbed up again. The water foamed and boiled for yards around. The ice world that had been so still before seemed in a moment to have been transformed into a raging bedlam. Any moment we might expect to have a walrus tusk or two through the boat, or to be heaved up and capsized. Something of this kind was the very least that could happen after such a terrible commotion. But the hurly-burly went on, and nothing came of it. I again picked out my victims. They went on bellowing and grunting like the others, but with blood streaming from their mouths and noses. Another ball, and one tumbled over and floated on the water. Now a ball to the second, and it did the same. Henriksen was ready with the harpoons and secured them both. One more was shot, but we had no more harpoons, and had to strike a seal hook into it to hold it up. The hook slipped, however, and the animal sank before we could save it. Whilst we were towing our booty to an ice-floe, we were still, for part of the time at least, surrounded by walruses, but there was no use in shooting any more, for we had no means of carrying them off. The Fram presently came up and took our two on board, and we were soon going ahead along the coast. We saw many walruses in this port. We shot two others in the afternoon, and could have got many more if we had had time to spare. It was in this same neighborhood that Nordenskjold also saw one or two small herds. We now continued our course against a strong current southwards along the coast, past the mouth of the Chutanga. This eastern part of the Timor Peninsula is a comparatively high mountainous region, but with a lower level stretch between the mountains and the sea. Apparently the same kind of lowland we had seen along the coast almost the whole way. As the sea seemed to be tolerably open and free from ice, we made several attempts to shorten our course by leaving the coast and striking across for the mouth of the Olenek, but every time thick ice drove us back to our channel by the land. On September 14th we were off the land lying between the Chutanga and the Anabara. This also was fairly high mountainous country with a low strip by the sea. In this respect, so I write in my diary, this whole coast reminds one very much of Jæren in Norway. But the mountains here are not so well separated, and are considerably lower than those farther north. The sea is unpleasantly shallow. At one time during the night we had only 4 fathoms, and were obliged to put back some distance. We have ice outside, quite close, but yet there is sufficient fairway to let us push on eastwards. The following day we got into good open water, but shallow, never more than 6 to 7 fathoms. We heard the roaring of waves to the east, so there must certainly be open water in that direction, which indeed we had expected. It was plain that the Lena, with its masses of warm water, was beginning to assert its influence. The sea here was browner and showed signs of some mixture of muddy river water. It was also much less salt. It would be foolish, I write in my diary for this day, September 15th, to go into the Olenek now that we are so late. Even if there were no danger from shoals, it would cost us too much time, probably a year. Besides, it is by no means sure that the Fram can get in there at all. It would be very tiresome business if she went aground in these waters. No doubt we should be very much better for a few more dogs, but to lose a year is too much. We shall rather head straight east for the New Siberian Islands, now that there is a good opportunity and really bright prospects. The ice here puzzles me a good deal. How in the world is it not swept northwards by the current which, according to my calculations, ought to set north from this coast, and which indeed we ourselves have felt? And it is such hard, thick ice, has the appearance of being several years old. Does it come from the eastward, or does it lie and grind round here in the sea between the north-going current of the Lena and the Timor Peninsula? I cannot tell yet, but anyhow it is different from the thin one-year-old ice we have seen until now in the Kara Sea and west of Cape Chelyuskin. Saturday, September 16th. We are keeping a northeasterly course by compass through open water, and have got pretty well north, but see no ice, and the air is dark to the northward. Mild weather and water comparatively warm, as high as 35° Fahrenheit. We have the current against us, and are always considerably west of our reckoning. Several flocks of eiderduck were seen in the course of the day. We ought to have land to the north of us. Can it be that which is keeping back the ice? Next day we met ice, and had to hold a little to the south to keep clear of it, and I began to fear that we should not be able to get as far as I had hoped. But in my notes for the following day, Monday, September 18th, I read, "A splendid day. Shaped our course northwards to the west of Bielkopf Island. Open sea, good wind from the west, good progress. Weather clear, and we had a little sunshine in the afternoon. Now the decisive moment approaches. At 12:15 shaped our course north to east by compass. Now it is to be proved if my theory, on which the whole expedition is based, is correct. If we are to find a little north from here, a north-flowing current. So far everything is better than I had expected. We are in latitude 75½ degrees north, and have still open water and dark sky to the north and west. In the evening there was ice light ahead and on the starboard bow. About 7 I thought that I could see ice, which, however, rose so regularly that it more resembled land, but it was too dark to see distinctly. It seemed as if it might be Bielkopf Island, and a big light spot further to the east might even be the reflection from the snow-covered Kotelnoi. I should have liked to run in here, partly to see a little of this interesting island, and partly to inspect the stores which we knew had been deposited for us here by the friendly care of Baron von Toll, but time was precious, and to the north the sea seemed to lie open to us. Prospects were bright, and we sailed steadily northwards, wondering what the morrow would bring, disappointment or hope. If all went well, we should reach Sannikov Land, that as yet untrodden ground. It was a strange feeling to be sailing away north in the dark night to unknown lands, over an open rolling sea, where no ship, no boat had been before. We might have been hundreds of miles away in more southerly waters, the air was so mild for September in this latitude. Tuesday, September 19th. I have never had such a splendid sail. On to the north, steadily north, with a good wind as fast as steam and sail can take us, and open sea mile after mile, watch after watch, through these unknown regions, always clearer and clearer of ice, one might almost say. How long will this last? The eye always turns to the northward as one paces the bridge. It is gazing into the future. But there is always the same dark sky ahead, which means open sea. My plan was standing its test. It seemed as if luck had been on our side ever since the 6th of September. We see nothing but clean water, as Henriksen answered from the crow's nest when I called up to him. When he was standing at the wheel later in the morning, and I was on the bridge, he suddenly said, "They little think at home in Norway just now that we are sailing straight for the Pole in clear water. No, they don't believe we have got so far, and I shouldn't have believed it myself if any one had prophesied it to me a fortnight ago, but true it is. All my reflections and inferences on the subject had led me to expect open water for a good way farther north, but it is seldom that one's inspirations turn out to be so correct. No ice light in any direction, not even now in the evening. We saw no land the whole day, but we had fog and thick weather all the morning and forenoon, so that we were still going at half speed, as we were afraid of coming suddenly on something. Now we are almost in 77 degrees north latitude. How long is it to go on? I have said all along that I should be glad if we reached 78 degrees. But Sverdrup is less easily satisfied. He says over 80 degrees, perhaps 84 degrees, 85 degrees. He even talks seriously of the open polar sea, which he once read about. He always comes back upon it in spite of my laughing at him. I have almost to ask myself if this is not a dream. One must have gone against the stream to know what it means to go with the stream. As it was on the Greenland expedition, so it is here. Dort war der Traum zur Wirklichkeit, Hier werde Werklichkeit zum Traum. Hardly any life visible here. Saw an auk or black guillemot today, and later a seagull in the distance. When I was hauling up a bucket of water on the evening to wash the deck, I noticed that it was sparkling with phosphorescence. One could almost have imagined oneself to be in the south. Wednesday, September 20th. I have had a rough awakening from my dream. As I was sitting at 11 a.m., looking at the map and thinking that my cup would soon be full, we had almost reached 78 degrees, there was a sudden luff, and I rushed out. Ahead of us lay the edge of the ice, long and compact, shining through the fog. I had a strong inclination to go eastward on the possibility of there being land in that direction, but it looked as if the ice extended farther south there, and there was the probability of being able to reach a higher latitude if we kept west, so we headed that way. The sun broke through for a moment just now, so we took an observation, which showed us to be in about 77 degrees 44 minutes north latitude. We now held northwest along the edge of the ice. It seemed to me as if there might be land at no great distance. We saw such a remarkable number of birds of various kinds. A flock of snipe or wading birds met us, followed us for a time, and then took their way south. They were probably on their passage from some land to the north of us. We could see nothing as the fog lay persistently over the ice. Again later we saw flocks of small snipe, indicating the possible proximity of land. Next day the weather was clearer, but still there was no land in sight. We were now a good way north of the spot where Baron von Toll has mapped the south coast of Sannikov Land, but in about the same longitude, so it is probably only a small island, and in any case cannot extend far north. On September 21st we had thick fog again, and when we had sailed north to the head of the bay in the ice and could get no farther, I decided to wait here for clear weather to see if progress farther north were possible. I calculated that we were now in about 78½ degrees north latitude. We tried several times during the day to take soundings, but did not succeed in reaching the bottom with 215 fathoms of line. To-day made the agreeable discovery that there are bugs on board. Must plan a campaign against them. Friday, September 22nd. Brilliant sunshine once again and white dazzling ice ahead. First we lay still in the fog because we could not see which way to go. Now it is clear, and we know just as little about it. It looks as if we were at the northern boundary of the open water. To the west the ice appears to extend south again. To the north it is compact and white, only a small open rift or pool every here and there, and the sky is whitish-blue everywhere on the horizon. It is from the east we have just come, but there we could see very little, and for want of anything better to do we shall make a short excursion in that direction, on the possibility of finding openings in the ice. If there were only time, what I should like would be to go east as far as Sannikov Island, or better still all the way to Bennet Land, to see what condition things are in there, but it is too late now. The sea will soon be freezing, and we should run a great risk of being frozen in at a disadvantageous point. Earlier Arctic explorers have considered it a necessity to keep near some coast, but this was exactly what I wanted to avoid. It was the drift of the ice that I wished to get into, and what I most feared was being blocked by land. It seemed as if we might do much worse than give ourselves up to the ice where we were, especially as our excursion to the east had proved that following the ice edge in that direction would soon force us south again. So in the meantime we made fast to a great ice block and prepared to clean the boiler and shift coals. We are lying in open water, with only a few large floes here and there, but I have a presentiment that this is our winter harbor. Great bug war today. We play the big steam hose on mattresses, sofa cushions, everything that we think can possibly harbor the enemies. All clothes are put into a barrel, which is hermetically closed except where the hose is introduced. Then full steam is set on. It whizzes and whistles inside, and a little forces its way through the joints, and we think that the animals must be having a fine hot time of it. But suddenly the barrel cracks, the steam rushes out, and the lid bursts off with a violent explosion, and is flung far along the deck. I still hope that there has been a great slaughter, for these are horrible enemies. Ewell tried the old experiment of setting one on a piece of wood, to see if it would creep north. It would not move at all, so he took a blubber hook and hit it to make it go, but it would do nothing but wriggle its head. The harder he hit, the more it wriggled. "Squash it, then," said Benson, and squashed it was. Friday, September 23rd. We are still at the same moorings, working at the coal. An unpleasant contrast, everything on board, men and dogs included, black and filthy, and everything around white and bright in beautiful sunshine. It looks as if more ice were driving in. Sunday, September 24th. Still coal shifting. Fog in the morning, which cleared off as the day went on, when we discovered that we were closely surrounded on all sides by tolerably thick ice. Between the floes lies slush ice, which will soon be quite firm. There is an open pool to be seen to the north, but not a large one. From the crow's nest, with a telescope, we can still descry the sea across the ice to the south. It looks as if we are being shut in. Well, we must even bid the ice welcome. A dead region, this. No life in any direction except a single seal, Phoca foetida, in the water, and on the floe beside us we can see a bear track some days old. We again try to get soundings, but still find no bottom. It is remarkable that there should be such depth here. Ugh! One can hardly imagine a dirtier, nastier job than a spell of coal shifting on board. It is a pity that such a useful thing as coal should be so black. What we are doing now is only hoisting it from the hold and filling the bunkers with it, but every man on board must help, and everything is in a mess. So many men must stand on the coal heap in the hold and fill the buckets, and so many hoist them. Jacobsen is specially good at this last job. His strong arms pull up bucket after bucket, as if they were as many boxes of matches. The rest of us go backwards and forwards with the buckets between the main hatch and the half-deck, pouring the coal into the bunkers, and down below stands Amundsen, packing it as black as he can be. Of course coal dust is flying over the whole deck, the dogs creep into the corners black and tousled, and we ourselves, well, we don't wear our best clothes on such days. We got some amusement out of the remarkable appearance of our faces with their dark complexions, black streaks at the most unlikely places, and eyes and white teeth shining through the dirt. Anyone happening to touch the white wall below with his hand leaves a black five-fingered blot, and the doors have a wealth of such mementos. The seats of the sofas must have their wrong sides turned up, else they would bear lasting marks of another part of the body, and the tablecloth, well, we fortunately do not possess such a thing. In short, coal shifting is as dirty and wretched an experience as one can well imagine in these bright and pure surroundings. One good thing is that there is plenty of fresh water to wash with. We can find it in every hollow on the floes, so there is some hope of our being clean again in time, and it is possible that this may be our last coal shifting. Monday, September 25th. Frozen in faster and faster. Beautiful still weather, 13 degrees of frost last night. Winter is coming now. Had a visit from a bear, which was off again before anyone got a shot at it. End of File 8.